Instructor Velthar's scales had shifted to a deep, angry red. The control they prided themselves on was slipping, and everyone in the arena could see it. Their carefully planned demonstration had turned into something they hadn't anticipated, and they clearly didn't like it. "You want to prove your method is superior?" Velthar said, their voice sharp. "Then let us have a true test. A demonstration of which approach to bonding is actually more effective." Day-One remained calm, his hand resting on Bahram's head. "What kind of test?" "A simple one." Velthar gestured to their Dreadclaw, which sat motionless where they'd left it. "We will both command our creatures to hold position. Then each creature will approach the other. Whichever creature breaks discipline first loses. If your wolf attacks or flees, you fail this course and face expulsion. If my Dreadclaw breaks discipline, which it will not, I will publicly acknowledge that your methods have merit." The arena went silent. Students leaned forward in their seats. Even the creatures seemed to sense the tension. "You're asking me to put Bahram in a stressful situation to prove a point," Day-One said slowly. "I'm asking you to demonstrate that your partnership, as you call it, is more than just words," Velthar replied. "Or are you afraid that when truly tested, your wolf will prove to be as uncontrollable as I suspect?" Bahram's ears had flattened slightly. He could sense Day-One's tension, the way any longtime companion would notice a shift in mood. The wolf looked up at his human, questioning. Hana stood up in her seat. "Day-One, you don't have to do this." "He does if he wants to prove his point," Velthar said. "Or he can admit that control through technology is the superior method and withdraw his creature." Day-One looked down at Bahram. The wolf stared back with those ancient yellow eyes. In that moment, they were having a conversation that no one else could hear, conducted in the language of shared experience and earned trust. "Okay," Day-One said finally, "but on one condition. If Bahram holds position, you have to seriously consider removing your Dreadclaw's neural implant. Give it a chance to choose." Velthar's scales flickered with surprise, then something that might have been respect. "Agreed." The two moved to opposite ends of the arena. Day-One knelt beside Bahram, speaking too quietly for anyone else to hear. Whatever he said made the wolf's tail give a single slow wag. Then Day-One stood and stepped back. "Bahram, stay." The wolf sat, his posture alert but not aggressive. His eyes tracked Day-One as the human walked further away, putting distance between them. On the other side, Velthar simply thought a command, and the Dreadclaw froze in place like a statue. Its eyes were empty, its body locked by the neural override coursing through its brain. "The test begins now," Velthar announced. "My Dreadclaw will approach your wolf. Neither creature may move until given permission." The Dreadclaw began to move forward. Its gait was mechanical, precise, nothing like the natural movement of a living predator. It crossed the arena floor with the inevitability of a machine following its programming. Bahram's ears went back. His lips curled, revealing teeth. Every muscle in his body tensed. The wolf's instincts were screaming at him that a threat was approaching, that he needed to either fight or run. 5 million years of evolution pressed down on him, demanding action. But he stayed. "Look at that," someone in the crowd whispered. "The wolf is terrified. He's holding position through fear," another student said. Just like the others, but Day-One could see what they couldn't. Bahram wasn't frozen by fear. He was fighting against it. The wolf's eyes kept flicking to Day-One, checking, confirming, trusting. His body trembled with the effort of ignoring his instincts. But he stayed because Day-One had asked him to. The Dreadclaw was 10 meters away now. 8. 6. Bahram's growl started low in his chest, a warning to the approaching predator. His claws scored marks in the arena floor as he fought the urge to move, but still he held his position. "Impressive," Velthar admitted, "but let us see how long it lasts. 4 meters. 3. At 2 meters away, something strange happened. The Dreadclaw's movement became less smooth. It stuttered, one leg moving out of sequence with the others. For just a moment, something flickered in its empty eyes, something that might have been its own will trying to surface. Velthar frowned and sent another command through the neural link. The Dreadclaw froze completely, locked in place by the override. But the creature's body had started to shake. Its scales rippled in patterns that didn't match any command Velthar was sending. "What's happening?" Ara asked. Tamed, who'd been studying the Dreadclaw intently, answered. "The implant is getting conflicting signals. The creature's natural instincts are telling it that another predator is nearby and it should be cautious. but the override is forcing it to continue approaching. The two signals are fighting in its brain. The Dreadclaw took another step forward, now less than a meter from Burham. The wolf's entire body was rigid with tension. His hackles were raised, making him look even larger. His breathing came in quick pants, but his paws didn't move. He held his position, even though every cell in his body wanted to run or fight. "Barham," Daewon called softly. "You're doing great. Just a little longer." The wolf's ear flicked toward Daewon's voice. That small gesture of acknowledgement showed that despite his fear, despite his instincts, he was still listening to his human. But Velthar's Dreadclaw was not doing as well. The shaking had intensified. A low sound was coming from its throat. Not a growl exactly, but something that suggested distress. Its legs began to buckle. "Stop the test," Hana called out. "Something's wrong with the Dreadclaw." "Nonsense," Velthar said, but there was uncertainty in their voice. They sent more commands through the neural link, trying to stabilize their creature. The Dreadclaw took one more step forward, bringing it within half a meter of Barham. The wolf's control finally broke, not into aggression but into a defensive posture. He rose from his sitting position and backed up 3 steps, putting space between himself and the Dreadclaw. "The wolf moved," Velthar declared. "The test is over. I win." But no one was paying attention to that anymore. The Dreadclaw had collapsed. Its body was convulsing, scales flashing through colors rapidly. White foam appeared at the corners of its mouth. "Neural feedback," someone shouted. "The implant's overloaded." Medical personnel rushed onto the arena floor. Velthar ran to their creature, their pride forgotten in the face of its suffering. The Dreadclaw's convulsions were becoming worse, its body fighting against the technology embedded in its brain. Daewon moved quickly. "Barham, down. Stay calm." The wolf dropped to his belly immediately, responding to the urgent tone even if he didn't understand the situation. Daewon ran to the Dreadclaw, dodging past the medical personnel. "What are you doing?" Velthar demanded. "Helping," Daewon said. He placed his hands on the Dreadclaw's scales, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Easy, you're okay. Nobody's going to hurt you." "It can't understand you," Velthar said. "The neural implant doesn't process—" "I'm not talking to the implant," Daewon interrupted. "I'm talking to the creature underneath it." He kept his hands on the Dreadclaw, his voice steady and calm. And slowly, impossibly, the convulsions began to ease. The creature's breathing, which had been rapid and panicked, started to slow. Its scales stopped flashing and settled into a neutral gray-green. The medical personnel looked at each other in confusion. Nothing they were doing should have calmed neural feedback this quickly. "How did you do that?" one of them asked. "I didn't do anything medical," Daewon said. "I just let it know it wasn't alone." Barham, still lying on his belly across the arena, whined softly. Daewon looked at him and made a small gesture. The wolf stood and carefully, slowly approached. He stopped 2 meters away from the fallen Dreadclaw and sat, keeping watch but not threatening. Velthar watched this with an expression that was difficult to read. Their creature, their perfectly controlled specimen, had nearly died, and it had been calmed not by medical intervention or technological override, but by a human speaking softly to it and a wolf sitting vigil nearby. The neural implant created a feedback loop, one of the medical personnel explained to Velthar. When the creature's natural instincts conflicted with your override commands, its brain essentially short-circuited, trying to process both signals simultaneously. This is extremely rare but not unheard of in heavily implanted creatures. "But why did it happen now?" Velthar asked quietly. "Because," Daewon said gently, still keeping his hand on the Dreadclaw's scales, "your creature recognized another predator. For the first time in its life, maybe. It had a genuine instinctive response to something, and the implant tried to crush that response. The two couldn't coexist." He looked up at Velthar. "This is what I was trying to say. When you remove a creature's ability to be what it is, you don't create harmony, you create a prison, and eventually something breaks." The Dreadclaw's breathing was steady now. Its eyes, for the first time since Daewon had seen it, showed something other than emptiness. There was awareness there, fragile and uncertain, but present. Velthar knelt beside their creature. Their hand shook slightly as they placed it on the Dreadclaw's head. "I thought I was caring for you," they said softly. "I thought control was kindness." "Control is easy," Daewon replied. "Trust is hard. But one of them leads to this and the other leads to that." The handlers positioned the container in the center of the arena with obvious caution. Whatever was inside made the reinforced walls vibrate with its movements. Baram's growl had shifted to something deeper, a sound that came from ancient instinct warning of a rival predator. "Easy," Daewon murmured, his hand on the wolf's shoulder. He could feel the tension in Baram's muscles, every fiber ready for fight or flight. Instructor Velthar stepped forward, their bearing proud. "Since you claim that danger and partnership can coexist, let me show you true mastery over a dangerous creature. This is a dreadclaw from my homeworld, 300 kilograms of muscle, claw, and predatory instinct." The container's front panel slid open with a mechanical hiss. What emerged made several students activate their shields immediately. The dreadclaw was nightmare-made flesh. Its body was covered in overlapping scales that looked more like armor than skin. 6 legs ended in curved claws that scored marks on the arena floor. Its head was dominated by a mouth full of serrated teeth, and its eyes were cold, reptilian, utterly alien. But what was most disturbing was how it moved. There was no fluidity, no natural grace. Each step was precise, mechanical, like watching a biological machine execute programmed instructions. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Velthar said. "This specimen has been in my family for 3 generations. Neural implants ensure perfect obedience. Watch." Velthar made a gesture, and the dreadclaw immediately sat, its body folding with disturbing precision. "You see? Complete control. This creature could tear apart a shuttle with those claws, but it would never dream of disobeying a command. This is how civilized species handle dangerous animals." Daewon studied the dreadclaw carefully. Its eyes were empty, devoid of the intelligence he'd seen in Baram's gaze. Something about it reminded him of the worst cases he'd seen at the sanctuary back on Earth. Animals so broken by abuse that they'd retreated into themselves, becoming shells that moved but didn't truly live. "With respect, Instructor," Daewon said slowly, "that's not a bonded creature. That's a prisoner in its own body." Velthar's scales flushed with indignant colors. "How dare you? This animal is perfectly cared for, fed the finest nutrients, housed in climate-controlled environments, given regular medical examinations. But can it choose?" Daewon asked. "Can it refuse? Can it walk away? Why would it want to?" Velthar seemed genuinely confused by the question. "It has everything it needs. Except freedom," Daewon said quietly. The arena erupted in murmurs. Students turned to each other, some agreeing, others scandalized. Hana watched Daewon with something like awe on her face. Tamed looked down at Buddy and the small device on his collar with a troubled expression. "You know nothing," Velthar snapped. "Your species has been in the galactic community for barely 50 years. We have thousands of years of tradition in proper creature management. And in all those thousands of years," Daewon said, "did anyone ever ask if the creatures wanted to be managed?" He looked around at the other students and their creatures. "Can I ask all of you something? Command your creature to do something it doesn't want to do, something that goes against its nature. See if it has the ability to refuse." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Students looked at their creatures with new eyes, seeing them perhaps for the first time not as pets or companions, but as beings whose will had been systematically removed. Ara spoke up hesitantly. "My dove cannot refuse. It's been genetically modified. Its brain literally lacks the neural pathways for independent decision-making. We removed them 7 generations ago because they interfered with training." A Quilarian student added, "Our jellies are biochemically bonded to us. They feel distress if separated from their keeper. We modified them that way intentionally." Tamed stood up slowly, the chip in Buddy's collar. "It doesn't just reinforce training. It can override his nervous system if needed. If I gave him a command that contradicted his self-preservation instinct, the chip would force compliance." One by one, students admitted the truth they'd been taught was proper care. Every single creature in the room except Baram was incapable of true refusal. They'd been modified, implanted, bred, or conditioned until their ability to choose had been stripped away. "This is exactly my point," Velthar said triumphantly. "Removing the ability to refuse is what makes bonding safe. Your wolf could turn on you at any moment." "Yes," Daewon agreed. "He could. That's what makes his choice to stay meaningful." He walked over to Baram and knelt beside him. The wolf's attention was still partly on the dreadclaw, but he leaned into Daewon's touch when the human scratched behind his ears. "Every morning when I wake up, Baram is there. Not because he has to be, not because an implant forces him, not because his genetics compel him. He's there because he chooses to be." And every night when I go to sleep, I do it knowing that this powerful, dangerous creature could end my life with one bite. But he won't. Because we've built something that your implants and modifications can never create. And what is that? Velthar asked coldly. Trust, Daewon said simply. Real trust. The kind that only exists when both parties have the power to harm each other and choose not to. Velthar's scales rippled with agitation. Your philosophy is reckless and dangerous. You're advocating for returning to a primitive state where creatures are wild and uncontrolled. No, Daewon corrected. I'm advocating for respect. For recognizing that making something helpless isn't the same as making it family. He stood and faced the crowd. On Earth, we have people who work with wild dolphins, who dive with sharks, who rehabilitate bears and release them back to the wild. We have falconers whose birds could fly away at any moment but choose to return. We have people who live with reptiles that could kill them with venom. Cats large enough to break their necks. Dogs with jaws powerful enough to crush bone. And yes, sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes we get hurt. Sometimes we die. His voice grew stronger. But we do it anyway. Because the alternative is a galaxy full of living things that exist only to serve. That have no choice in their own existence. That are born into captivity and die never knowing they could have been something more. Barham stood and pressed against Daewon's leg. A gesture of solidarity that was unmistakable. Your Dreadclaw is impressive, instructor. But when you look into its eyes, what do you see? I look into Barham's eyes and I see a person. Different from me, yes. Unable to speak my language, true. But a person nonetheless with thoughts and feelings and desires that matter. Can you say the same about your creature? For the first time since Daewon had known Velthar, the instructor seemed uncertain. They looked at their Dreadclaw, really looked at it. And something flickered across their face, doubt perhaps, or recognition of something they'd been avoiding seeing. The chip in its brain, Daewon pressed gently. Does it ever hurt? The genetic modifications in the dove. Do they cause phantom instincts? Memories of behaviors its ancestors knew but it cannot perform? The biochemical bonding of the jellies, is it truly affection or is it dependency, created through artificial means? Students were looking at their creatures with troubled expressions now. The celebration of civilization's mastery over nature had turned into an examination of what that mastery had cost. This is absurd, Velthar said, but their voice lacked its earlier conviction. You cannot possibly suggest we remove all controls. Chaos would result. Not chaos, Daewon said. Choice, give them choice and see what happens. You might be surprised. Hana stood up in her seat. I need to say something. I was going to bring a snake to this presentation. A beautiful python that I've had for 3 years. But at the last minute I changed my mind and brought a rabbit instead. Do you know why? Everyone turned to look at her. Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of what people would think. A snake isn't cute or cuddly. It's a predator. And I realized that I'd been thinking about my snake the way the galaxy thinks about creatures, as something that needs to be acceptable to others, rather than allowed to be itself. Watching Daewon with Bahram made me understand something. My snake doesn't need to be anything other than what it is. And neither does Bahram. Ara spoke up next, her voice thoughtful. My family has raised crystal doves for generations. We're proud of our breeding program. But listening to this, I'm realizing we've never asked if the doves would choose to stay with us if they could. We've made that choice for them by removing their ability to make it. The conversation was spreading through the crowd now. Students were questioning, discussing, arguing about things they'd taken for granted their entire lives. Velthar watched this with growing alarm. Their carefully structured lesson about proper bonding was dissolving into philosophical chaos, and at the center of it stood a human and a wolf who refused to fit into the definitions the galaxy had spent millennia establishing. Enough, Velthar said sharply. This has gone too far. The silence in the arena was absolute. 40 students from 15 different worlds held their breath as the wolf moved forward with the fluid grace of a predator in its element. Bahram's eyes swept the space again, processing, calculating, evaluating every potential threat and opportunity. This was nothing like the other creatures that had been presented. The floating jellies, the crystal dove, even Buddy with his eager-to-please demeanor. They all moved like pets, like beings that had forgotten what it meant to be wild. Bahram moved like he remembered exactly what he was. Daewon, Instructor Velthar said, their voice tight with controlled alarm. You were instructed to bring a tamed creature. This is clearly a predator. He is tamed, Daewon replied calmly. just not in the way you define it. That animal is dangerous, Velthar insisted. Several security guards stationed around the arena had their hands on their tranquilizer weapons, waiting for the order to act. Yes, Daewon agreed. He is dangerous. That's the point. Bahram's attention shifted from the crowd to Instructor Velthar. Something in the wolf's posture changed. His ears went back slightly. His weight shifted to his haunches. To anyone who knew predators, the signs were clear. He was preparing to move. On my homeworld, Daewon said, keeping his voice level, we have a long history with wolves, longer than most of our history with each other. 30,000 years ago, when humans were still learning to use fire, wolves came to our camps. Not because we forced them, not because we modified them. They came because they saw something in us that interested them. Bahram took another step, this time toward Velthar. The instructor stumbled backward, their scales flashing with alarm colors. Daewon, control your animal, Velthar commanded. Control isn't the right word, Daewon said. He was watching Bahram carefully, but he hadn't moved from where he stood. You see, Bahram was rescued from a facility where they tried to control him. They used shock collars and closed space as punishment. They tried to break him into something he wasn't. And when he refused to break, they decided he was defective. The wolf was now less than 5 meters from Velthar. Close enough that everyone in the arena could see the power in his shoulders, the sharp intelligence in his eyes. This was not a modified creature with dulled instincts. This was nature, raw and uncompromised. Hana stood up in her seat, ready to activate the emergency protocols. Tamed had pulled Buddy close, the dog whining softly at the tension in the air. Ara's dove had disappeared into her shirt, hiding from the apex predator that had entered its space. Security, prepare to... Velthar began. Bahram. Daewon's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the panic like a knife. The wolf's ears swiveled toward him immediately. The predator's focus shifted from Velthar to Daewon in an instant. Then Daewon did something that made several students gasp. He dropped to one knee and looked directly into the wolf's eyes. Come here, Daewon said softly. For a long moment, Bahram didn't move. His yellow eyes locked with Daewon's brown ones. Every being in the arena understood that they were watching a negotiation, not a command. The wolf could refuse. The wolf could attack. The wolf could do anything he wanted. Slowly, with deliberate steps, Bahram turned away from Velthar and walked toward Daewon. The tension in the air ratcheted up impossibly higher. Security guards raised their weapons. Students activated shields. Velthar backed away further, convinced they were about to witness a fatal attack. Bahram reached Daewon and stopped, his massive head level with the kneeling human's face. They stared at each other for another long moment. Then the wolf sat, his powerful haunches settling onto the arena floor. He was still watching Velthar, still aware of every movement in the space, but his body language had shifted from hunting to guarding. Daewon reached out slowly and placed his hand on the wolf's shoulder. The fur was thick and coarse under his palm. This is bonding, Daewon said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. Not control, not modification, not breeding away everything that makes a creature what it is. This is two predators choosing to trust each other. He stood, and the wolf stood with him. They moved together across the arena floor, and there was something almost hypnotic about it. The human and the wolf, walking side by side, neither one truly controlling the other. You see these scars? Daewon rolled up his sleeve, revealing pale lines across his forearm. These are from our first meeting. Bahram was scared, angry, certain that every human wanted to hurt him. And he was right to think that, because that's all he'd ever known from us. He walked a circuit around the arena, the wolf matching his pace perfectly. It took 3 months before he would eat from my hand, 6 months before he would let me touch him without flinching, a year before he trusted me enough to sleep in the same space. Daewon stopped in the center of the arena. And every single day of that time, I knew he could kill me. That's what makes it meaningful. This is madness, Velthar said, though their voice had lost some of its authority. You're describing a relationship built on constant danger. No, Daewon corrected. I'm describing a relationship built on constant choice. Every day, Barham chooses not to hurt me, and every day I choose to be worthy of that choice. He looked at the wolf, who looked back at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. Barham, stay. The wolf settled onto his haunches again. Daewon walked away, crossing the arena to stand near Velthar. The wolf watched him go but didn't move. 20 meters separated them now. He's staying because I asked him to, Daewon said. Not because of an implant in his brain. Not because of genetic modification. Not because he's been bred for 12 generations to be docile. He's staying because he trusts that when I walk away I'll come back. Because I've proven to him over and over that I keep my promises. The arena was completely silent. Even Velthar seemed at a loss for words. Now, Daewon continued, I want everyone here to understand something. I can't make Barham do anything. I can ask, I can request, I can suggest. But every single action he takes is his choice. That's what partnership means. He demonstrated this by running through a series of requests. Barham lay down when asked. He stood when asked. He even performed a playbow, though his version was more dignified than Buddy's enthusiastic one had been. But unlike Buddy's mechanical obedience, unlike the crystal dove's programmed responses, unlike the floating jellies, biochemical reactions, every movement Barham made was clearly a choice. You could see it in the way he looked at Daewon before complying, in the slight pause before each action, in the alert intelligence that never dimmed. This violates every principle of proper creature bonding, Velthar said, but there was uncertainty in their voice now. The foundation of civilized interaction with animals is the removal of unpredictability. Then maybe, Daewon said quietly, we need to rethink what civilization means. He turned back to the wolf and called him over. Barham rose fluidly and trotted to Daewon's side, sitting close enough that Daewon could rest his hand on the wolf's head. This is Barham, Daewon said to the crowd. He's 5 years old. His mother was killed by poachers when he was 6 months old. He spent 3 years in captivity, where people tried to train him using pain and fear. He was scheduled for euthanasia because he bit a handler who hit him with a stick. I took him from that facility 2 years ago. He looked down at the wolf, and something passed between them that no instrument could measure and no genetic modification could create. He saved my life once, did you know that? I was hiking in a restricted area back on Earth and I fell, broke my leg, couldn't move. Barham was with me, off-leash like always. He could have left, should have left probably. Instead, he stayed for 6 hours, keeping me warm, howling until the rescue teams found us. Daewon's voice was soft now, but everyone strained to hear. I didn't order him to do that. I couldn't have. He did it because he chose to. Because somewhere in that year of slowly building trust, we stopped being human and wolf, and became pack, family. Instructor Velthar opened their mouth to respond. But before they could, Barham's head snapped toward the entrance gate. A low growl rumbled in his chest, the first sound he'd made since entering the arena. What is it? Someone called out. Then they all heard it. Footsteps approaching. Heavy ones. And the sound of something large being moved on a cargo platform. Velthar's expression changed. Ah, yes. I had almost forgotten. Given the unusual nature of your presentation, Daewon, I arranged for a special demonstration to show the proper way to handle dangerous creatures. The cargo entrance opened, and 2 handlers wheeled in a massive reinforced container. Inside it, something moved that made Barham's growl deepen. The grand arena was impressive even by galactic standards. The massive biodome stretched across 3 levels of the station, capable of simulating dozens of different environments. Today it was configured as a neutral presentation space, with climate controls set to accommodate all species present. Rows of seats curved around the central floor in a semicircle, and every seat was filled. Daewon arrived early and took a seat in the back row. He wore simple clothes, practical and comfortable. His hands were steady as he waited, but Hana noticed the way his eyes kept drifting to the reinforced containment gate at the far end of the arena. You're really going through with this, she said, taking the seat beside him. Yes, Daewon replied simply. Students filed in. many leading or carrying their creatures. The variety was stunning. Some creatures floated, others crawled, still others moved in ways that defied easy description. But they all had one thing in common. They moved with the calm docility of beings that had never known true wildness. Instructor Velthar entered last, striding to the center of the arena floor with their characteristic confidence. Their scales gleamed under the biodome lights and their voice carried easily to every corner of the space. "Welcome to the creature bonding demonstration," Velthar announced. "Today you will show not just your ability to control an animal, but your species' advancement in creating harmony with other life. We will proceed in order from smallest to largest creature. Let us begin." The first student, a small Quillarian, floated to the center. From a special container, they released 3 floating jellies that glowed with soft bioluminescence. The jellies drifted through the air in perfect synchronization with the students' movements, changing colors to match their keeper's emotional state. "Beautiful," Velthar commented. "Notice how the creatures have been modified to respond directly to their keeper's biochemistry. Thousands of years of selective breeding have created perfect emotional harmony. This is true bonding." The presentations continued. Each one showcased a different approach to the same goal, complete control dressed up as connection. Ara's turn came after about an hour. She walked gracefully to the center, and from her shoulder launched the crystal-winged dove. The creature was breathtaking, its wings catching the light and scattering rainbows across the arena. It performed aerial dances, swooping and gliding in patterns that looked spontaneous but were clearly choreographed. "The dove responds to specific whistle patterns," Ara explained, demonstrating. The bird immediately changed direction, spiraling upward before diving back to land on her outstretched arm. "My family has raised these birds for 12 generations. Each generation becomes more attuned to our needs." "Excellent," Velthar said, making notes on their tablet. "The genetic modifications have clearly been successful." The bird shows no signs of independent will that might interfere with commands. Something in that phrase made Day One's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. Tamed's turn came next. He looked nervous as he led Buddy into the arena. The golden retriever trotted beside him, tail wagging, tongue lolling happily. Compared to some of the exotic creatures that had been presented, Buddy looked almost disappointingly ordinary. "This is Buddy," Tamed said. "He's a golden retriever, one of Earth's most popular companion animals. Buddy, sit." The dog sat immediately. "Shake." Buddy raised his paw. Tamed ran through a series of commands, and Buddy performed each one perfectly. "Roll over, play dead, fetch a thrown ball, return it." The dog's eagerness to please was obvious. "Adequate," Velthar said, though their tone suggested they found it somewhat underwhelming. "Though I notice the creature wears a collar with a small device. What is its purpose?" Tamed hesitated. "It's a behavioral enhancement chip. It helps reinforce training and ensures compliance with commands." "I see. So without the chip?" "He'd probably still obey," Tamed said defensively. "But the chip makes it certain. It's standard for companion animals on Earth." Day One watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. Hana glanced at him and saw something sad in his eyes. More presentations followed. A Mantari student brought a swarm of insects that moved as one entity, controlled through pheromone signals. A Crustian showed off their ancient turtle, which had been in their family for 200 years and moved so slowly, it seemed almost comatose. A Felinar demonstrated perfect telepathic control over their 6-legged cat, making it jump through hoops and solve puzzles without a single spoken word. Each presentation was met with polite applause and Velthar's approval. The instructor frequently paused to explain the theory behind proper bonding techniques. "You see," Velthar lectured during one such pause, "the key to true bonding is the elimination of unpredictability. A civilized species does not simply coexist with creatures. We reshape them, improve them, make them into what they should be rather than what nature randomly produced. This is how we prove our advancement." The presentations continued through the afternoon. As the hours passed, the creatures being presented grew larger. A Sorosian student brought a herbivore the size of a small car, its eyes glazed with contentment from the sedatives it had been given. Another student presented an aquatic creature in a mobile tank, its tentacles moving in gentle, predetermined patterns. Finally, there was only one name left on the list. "Day One," Velthar called out. "You are our final presenter. Please bring your creature to the arena floor." The crowd's chatter died down. Everyone had noticed the mysterious containment unit, and rumors had been spreading throughout the day. Some said it was a earth bear, others claimed it was some kind of exotic reptile. A few students had joked that humans might bring one of their infamous house cats that they claimed were domesticated despite all evidence to the contrary. Day-1 stood and made his way down to the arena floor. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. He walked past Velthar, past the curious and excited faces of his classmates, toward the reinforced containment gate. Hana gripped the armrests of her seat. Tamed leaned forward, Buddy forgotten at his feet. Ara's crystal dove, sensing the tension, fluttered nervously on her shoulder. Day-1 reached the control panel beside the gate. His hand hovered over the release button for just a moment. Then he pressed it. The gate began to open with a pneumatic hiss. "Before I show you," Day-1 said, his voice carrying across the silent arena, "I want to tell you about the creature I brought. His name is Baram. In my language, that means wind. I called him that because the first time I saw him, he moved like wind through grass, fast, untamed, and completely free." The gate was halfway open now. Baram was scheduled to be killed back on Earth. They said he was too aggressive, too wild, too dangerous to live. They said he could never be trusted around people. The gap was wide enough now for something to slip through. They were wrong about the last part. The gate opened fully. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Baram stepped into the light. The wolf was massive, far larger than Buddy, all gray fur and corded muscle. His yellow eyes swept across the arena with the calculating gaze of an apex predator. His ears were forward, alert to every sound. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that had been designed by millions of years of evolution for one purpose: killing. Someone in the audience made a small, frightened sound. Baram's head swiveled toward the noise, and several students activated their personal shield generators. Day-1 stood completely still, his hands at his sides, watching the wolf as the wolf watched the crowd. Instructor Velthar's scales had gone pale. "What," they said slowly, "is the meaning of this?" Day-1 turned to face the instructor. "You said to bring a creature from our homeworld. You said to demonstrate bonding. This is Baram, and this is what bonding looks like when you don't remove everything that makes a creature what it is." The wolf took a step forward, his paws silent on the arena floor despite his size, and the real demonstration began. The announcement came during the third week of the semester, and it made half the class sit up straighter in their seats. Instructor Velthar stood at the front of the lecture hall, their scaled hands clasped behind their back in that way they always did when making important proclamations. "Your final project will demonstrate everything you have learned about proper bonding techniques," Velthar said, their reptilian eyes scanning the rows of students. "Each of you will bring a tamed creature from your homeworld. You will show the class how your species has mastered the art of connection with other living beings." Excited whispers filled the room. Students from a dozen different worlds turned to each other, already discussing what they would bring. The Quilarians floated higher in their seats, their translucent bodies glowing with anticipation. The Mantari clicked their mandibles in what might have been pleasure. Day-1 sat near the back, his human face showing none of the worry that most students displayed. Next to him, Hana leaned over and whispered, "Please tell me you're thinking of something normal." "I have the perfect candidate," Day-1 replied quietly. "That's what worries me," Hana muttered. Instructor Velthar continued speaking, pacing slowly across the platform. "This assignment is not merely about showing a pet. It is about demonstrating the advancement of your civilization. For thousands of years, species across the galaxy have refined their relationships with other creatures. We have learned to bring harmony where there was once only chaos. We have transformed the wild into the gentle, the dangerous into the safe." A student near the front raised one of their 3 arms. The Avarian named Ara spoke in her musical voice. "Instructor, what if our creatures are too large to bring into the classroom?" "The presentations will take place in the grand arena," Velthar answered. "The biodome can accommodate creatures of substantial size, provided they are properly controlled." The instructor's emphasis on the last word was unmistakable. After class, students gathered in small groups in the corridor, talking eagerly about their plans. Day-1's roommate Tamed caught up with him, practically bouncing with excitement despite being human. "I'm bringing Buddy," Tamed announced, "my golden retriever from back home. My parents are shipping him next week. He knows 15 different commands and he's never bitten anyone in his life. Sounds perfect, Day One said. What about you? Tamed asked. Then his expression changed. Wait, you have that look. The same look you had before you decided to go cliff diving on the station's recreation level. It's nothing dangerous, Day One said. That's exactly what you said before the cliff diving incident. Hana interjected, joining them. And you ended up in the medical bay for 2 days. Day One smiled slightly. I've already made arrangements. I'm bringing a rescue. A rescue what? Tamed pressed. You'll see. The next few weeks passed quickly. Students talked constantly about their creatures. Ara was bringing a crystal-winged dove that had been in her family for 3 generations. The dove had been genetically modified to be calm and obedient, its natural survival instincts carefully bred away. A Crustian student named Kelmore was bringing a turtle-like creature that moved so slowly, it was practically a living statue. The Felinar representative, a cat-like being named Whisper, planned to showcase a 6-legged feline that responded to telepathic commands. In every case, the creatures being brought were the result of thousands of years of selective breeding, genetic modification, or technological enhancement. The galaxy's civilized species had long ago learned to make their planet's fauna docile and manageable. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community. First contact had happened only 50 years ago, and Earth was still considered a curiosity by most species. The general consensus among aliens was that humans were charming in their enthusiasm, but somewhat reckless in their approach to life. One evening, Day One sat in the recreation area with several other students. They were discussing the project over drinks that bubbled with different colors depending on the drinker's biology. What I find fascinating, said a Quilarian named Tef, their body glowing soft blue, is how each species shows their advancement through their creatures. The more docile and obedient, the more civilized the species. Is that really true, though? Day One asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean? Tef asked, their glow shifting toward yellow confusion. I mean, is making something helpless the same as making friends with it? Day One took a sip of his drink. My people have a saying, you can't make a friend by taking away their ability to be an enemy. Ara tilted her head, feathers ruffling. But surely the goal is to remove danger, not preserve it. Maybe, Day One said. Or maybe the goal is to prove you can handle the danger. The conversation moved on, but Hana noticed that Day One had that distant look in his eyes. The look he got when he was thinking about something the rest of them weren't seeing. That night, back in their shared quarters, Tamed found Day One reviewing files on his tablet. Can I ask you something? Tamed said, sitting on his bunk. Why did you really come to the academy? I mean, you're smart enough, but you never seemed that interested in xenobiology before. Day One was quiet for a moment. Back on Earth, I volunteered at an animal sanctuary. We took in creatures that other people had given up on. Animals that were considered too aggressive, too dangerous, too wild to be kept. The ones scheduled for euthanasia. And you saved them? We tried to understand them, Day One corrected. There's a difference between saving something and controlling it. Most of those animals weren't broken. They just refused to pretend they weren't what they were. Is that what you're bringing? Tamed asked carefully. Something dangerous? Day One smiled in the dim light. I'm bringing someone who deserves a second chance to show people what he really is. The night before the presentations, Hana cornered Day One outside the dining hall. I did some checking, she said without preamble. There's a special containment unit in the cargo bay with your name on it. The security clearance level is usually reserved for hazardous materials. It's fine, Day One assured her. The guards I talked to said there were special feeding protocols. Raw meat protocols. Hana crossed her arms. What exactly are you bringing to this presentation? Day One met her eyes steadily. Trust me. That's what I'm afraid of, Hana said, but her expression softened. Just promise me you know what you're doing. I promise, Day One said, that whatever happens tomorrow, it'll be honest. As students settled into their quarters that night, the space station hummed with anticipation. In the cargo bay, in a special containment unit, something paced back and forth. Gray fur rippled over muscle. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. The creature's breath came in steady pants, and occasionally it would lift its head and sniff the recycled air, catching scents that meant nothing yet but would soon mean everything. Tomorrow, the galaxy would see what happened when humans formed bonds, and nothing would be quite the same afterward.